Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. We hope you're staying safe and well. Today's webinar will help you take control of and own your finances. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar, Owning Your Finances, part of the 2021 Alumni Webinar Series. Before we get started, I want to turn things over briefly to Shannon Tim from the Wisconsin School of Business. Shannon?
Thanks, Jeremiah. I am the Director of Alumni Relations for the Wisconsin School of Business, so it's great to be with you and all of our alumni on the webinar today. I think today's topic on personal finances is something that will obviously always be important for our entire lives, but with all of the unknowns from the last year, I think it can also cause some extra stress right now. So I'm happy that we have Ann Martel with us today to help us all take control of our finances. As usual, before we get started, I just wanted to share some other upcoming alumni opportunities with all of you while I have you. So if we could go to the next slide. So we are continuing our Badger Executive Talk series that we started this last June. These events feature Dean Samba Murthy and an executive from our alumni community, and they discuss both present day business challenges and they talk about leadership. So we have speakers scheduled through April, as you can see, with our next event coming up next week, actually, with Cheryl Stallworth. And she's an expert on brands and brand strategy, so really looking forward to that conversation with Dean Samba. We also have some additional upcoming webinars on corporate social responsibility and navigating the digital landscape, so make sure that you take a look at those and register if you're interested. And then stay tuned for a new series that we're going to be introducing soon. Think about things that you already know and love, so music, food, fashion. There's a business side to all of these, and we're going to be featuring our alumni who work in them. So stay tuned for more information. And as always, for more information on anything listed here or other alumni opportunities, you can visit wsb.wisc.edu/alumni, the website that you see on your screen there. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Jeremiah to get us started.
Wouldn't be 2021 if I didn't forget to unmute myself. Thank you, Shannon. Today's webinar is also brought to you by the Wisconsin School of Business Center for Professional and Executive Development. CPED offers online and in-person programs and certificates that will give you the modern, relevant skills needed to advance your career. All of our programs offer interactive learning sessions facilitated by instructors with practical business experience. CPED also partners with organizations to provide customized professional development programs, coaching, and consulting. For more information on the Center for Professional and Executive Development, please visit our website at uwcped.org. So if you have any questions during today's webinar, you could submit those using the questions box in the GoToWebinar control panel. And if you expand or collapse that control panel using the orange arrow. We'll post questions that are submitted during the Q&A at the end of today's webinar. I also want to mention that today's webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording and a copy of the presentation will be made available within the next few days. And now I'd like to introduce today's facilitator, Ann Martel. Ann is the instructor of finance and accounting for non-financial professionals at the Wisconsin School of Business Center for Professional and Executive Development. Ann is a highly regarded business leader with a passion for delivering high-energy presentations and classes on the topics of business acumen and improving personal results. Ann's many years of teaching experience at Marquette University in Milwaukee and Lakeland College in Sheboygan has prepared her to engage audiences of all levels of tenure and experience. Ann, thank you for joining us today. I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks so much, Jeremiah, and welcome everybody. Glad to be with you on this beautiful January day. It's fun to say that. We don't get to say that very much here in beautiful Wisconsin. Packers won, so it's a good week to be living in Wisconsin. So welcome everybody. As Jeremiah said, I'm Ann Martel. I am also an alum of UW-Madison. Graduated many years ago. We won't say how many. Enough that my daughter is also an alum. So if my daughter's on the call, it'd be great. But I'm very happy to be here with you to talk about owning your own personal finances. This is the graphic that we have come to know and love throughout 2020. The lovely coronavirus graphic that looks like something with a bunch of suction cups on it to me. And obviously, the virus has changed so much in our world, not just from a health care perspective, a health perspective, from a global perspective, from a social perspective, but also from a financial perspective. And the financial perspective, when I facilitate finance and accounting for non-financial professionals, I'm normally looking at it from a business perspective, from a corporate perspective, helping participants understand how their corporation, how their organization makes money, generates cash, and survives, especially in times like 2020 have come to show us. But there's also a personal financial perspective that we're dealing with when we think about some of the results and the consequences of learning to live with this virus over almost the last 12 months. And so in owning your finances, I like to take a four-legged approach. And here's my fourth. I'm just kidding. Even though it's a cute picture of a puppy, and we all love pictures of a puppy, that's not really the four legs that I'm talking about. What I am talking about is more from a personal financial perspective. And I want to read you a quote from an article that recently appeared in Forbes magazine. And I quote, "Our country's lack of financial literacy has contributed to this crisis. And now, as so many Americans face unprecedented financial stress, we must make financial literacy a priority." Music to my ears, something that is a passion of mine, whether it's from a corporate perspective or a personal perspective. In another recent survey, 89% of Americans that have been surveyed, they believe that understanding financial literacy and that lack of it contributes to bigger social issues, poverty, wealth inequality, all of those things that have a huge impact on the day-to-day lives of individuals throughout the world. Having an increased sense of financial literacy, a better confidence level in financial literacy is extremely important. And it is really based on four legs. Whether we're in a pandemic or we're not, these four legs of personal finance are extremely important. And each one of them, if it's a little wobbly, the chair can fall over. And these legs have become a little unstable over the last year. So first, we have income. Income is the first stool, the first leg of the stool of building and maintaining your personal finance. The second would be expenses. What are you spending money on? The third is debt. And the fourth is assets. Now I know the kind of the knee-jerk reaction, we're talking about personal finance during especially COVID. We think a lot about the struggling businesses, the stories we've heard about businesses going out of business, the airline industry having just terrible performance results, the hospitality industry, all of these things that are going on. We hear about people losing their jobs, unemployment, underemployment. But there's also another side of personal finance that is occurring during this time, which is some people are operating very well. They're seeing even increased personal finance success. So as I'm talking about these four legs of the personal finance stool, I'm going to look at it from a little bit of both sides of the coin. So first, let's just talk about income for a minute. You're working in a job, you got a job, maybe you love it. You may be not working at a job. You may be one of the casualties that are now unemployed. You may be working in a job that you don't really care for, or it doesn't really match your skill level, your educational level, your competencies. So you're almost underemployed. So how do you build income? One of the first things that sometimes goes overlooked is instead of automatically looking for another job, I'm going to move on, I'm going to get a promotion, I'm going to go somewhere else to a different company, maybe asking yourself, is it time to ask for a raise? This one's a ticklish one because especially now when you hear so much about businesses that are struggling, it may not be the time where you're working to ask for a raise. If you're in an industry that's really struggling and maybe is struggling just to survive, it may not be time to ask for a raise. But if you're a key person, or if you're in an industry that is not struggling, it might be time to look at and consider asking for a raise. How do you do that? Well, first of all, you got to know your stuff. There's a lot of information out in the internet world today where you can get information based on your qualifications, your job title, length of service with an organization, what your salary range should be. It's much more available than it ever has been before. If you're unfamiliar with doing anything, Glassdoor.com is a good place to start. Glassdoor.com, free if you sign up and give them your email. They don't spam you as far as I can tell, but they have a lot of information on organizations and what they pay. You can look up if you're a project manager and you want to find out what a project manager makes in the Midwest or at this particular company. You can actually do some searches in Glassdoor.com to find out what those salary ranges are, what people are currently earning at those companies. There are a lot of salary surveys that are out there. For example, if you are in the accounting field, Robert Half traditionally has put out every year an annual salary survey, which is free, that you can go and see at any level or type of position in the accounting and finance world, what are companies currently paying? Public companies, private companies, for-profits, nonprofits. So doing your homework and getting an understanding of what you are worth today is an important first step of laying the foundation of asking for a raise. The second area that you would need to do is use the example, use what you know to almost reapply for your job. Have a good idea of what you have contributed that is unusual. Now, just showed up. Woo, I showed up on time. But what have you contributed? It's like marketing yourself to your existing company. How are you different? What have you contributed? What makes you, what's your differentiating factor, to use a marketing term, that would entitle you or encourage you to ask for more money? So that's one way of building income, right where you're at. Another way is generating additional sources of income. If you have the time, if you have the inclination, you may need at this point in time to look at other sources of income. Now, it might be something as simple as going to work at Target or Kohl's to generate some additional money on the weekends or in the evenings. It could be what I did many years ago. When I graduated from UW, I worked my way through college, all the way through college. So when I actually started my first accounting job at American Family, I found I had a lot of time on my hands. And I went into teaching. I started teaching part-time, one night a week, 2 nights a week. And I found out that I really, really liked it. It was a great source of additional income. So looking at your skill set and thinking, is there a way I could parlay this into a different, maybe part-time augmented position to what I do during the day? Is it time to rethink your career map or your career path? This might be your option if you're thinking about, I'm not really enjoying what I'm doing. I think there's a better path for me or a better map for me. And there are a lot of resources that are out there that can either build your skills in a particular area or give you ideas of if you need to take a totally different career path that might fit your competencies, your interests a little bit better. Shameless plug for CPED. They have a lot of really good certificate programs that you can go into that help build some of those skill set levels that could launch you into a different career path. And my fourth option is go where the jobs are. And this used to mean geographically, being flexible, going to where the jobs are. And I love to give the example of, I live in Mayville, Wisconsin, which is a very, very small town. It's about 45 minutes to an hour northeast of Madison, about an hour or so northwest of Milwaukee, so kind of like right at the triangle. And I live in Dodge County, which is a very small county. From 2017 till when the pandemic started, Dodge County's unemployment rate was hovered between 2, maybe 3%. And we have some huge manufacturing companies here. We have a very large John Deere plant. We have a very large Quad Graphics. We have Michael's Construction. We have MEC, Mayville Engineering Company. A lot of very large employees in Dodge County, and they struggle to get talented people. So I'm always like, hey, move to Dodge County. You can work at one of these large employees. Cost of living's really, really low. But I say it with tongue in cheek because geographically, if you do have the ability to be flexible, there are parts of the country that are, and the world, that are more conducive to finding a different job than in some of our other areas of the country. In addition to that, there are industries, go to where the jobs are. There are industries that are better for looking for a new position than others. Now, this graph from Vox shows some of the jobs that are vulnerable to layoffs during COVID-19. No surprise, food and beverage, clothing and retail, accommodations, hotels, automobile services, people are driving less, education, travel. These are things that are pretty understandable. But in another survey from LinkedIn or a publication from LinkedIn, they're showing the companies that are hiring. And it goes to support what the US Bureau of Labor Statistics says, that on the last business day of October, the number and rate of job openings, they were, hadn't changed all that much, but there's a lot of jobs that are open. 6.7 million jobs open at the end of October. So there are jobs that are out there. So if this is a route that you feel you need to take, where are those jobs? Who's hiring right now? Well, obviously, this was at the very start of the pandemic. You had Target, you had UPS, you have FedEx, you have McDonald's, you have the Department of Veterans Affairs, Taco Bell, always great, Home Depot, InstaWord. I'm just shifting, scrolling through this very quickly, but there are companies that are hiring upwards of 10,000 jobs in this year, even since the pandemic. It's a matter of finding where they are. Now, the second leg of the stool is managing expenses. Managing expenses is always one I have struggled with. I'll be honest with you. I am not the poster child for personal finance sometimes. I have learned through the series of hard knocks of how to really try to turn my personal financial house in order. And this has been my biggest struggle. I didn't have any problem going out and getting another teaching job. That came kind of easy to me. But boy, managing expenses is really hard for me because I like to live in the moment. I'm the YOLO, you only live once. And it has really hurt me from a personal financial perspective. But what are some ways that you can manage expenses, especially during this time? I love to use the analogy that's used a lot in time management. It's a story about a professor that's talking about time management skills and has this big mason jar that fills up with really large rocks. And do we have any more room for rocks in this jar? And the students say no, and then he fills it with smaller rocks that sift in between the big rocks. It asks again, do we have any more room for any more rocks? And then he finally gets to pebbles the size of sand and fills up the jar. The same is true for personal finance. Most of us know our boulders. Most of us have a pretty good idea of what's my car payment? How much do I spend on gas? What's my rent or my mortgage? But yeah, we start to get a little fuzzy when it's, well, how much do I spend on groceries? How much do I spend on entertainment? What do I spend on streaming services? How much am I spending on my cup of coffee every day? Those are the pebbles and the grains of sand that if managing expenses seems to be a challenge for you, this might be an area where you can spend some time. Look at your bank statement. Where are you spending? Where are you swiping your debit card? Where are you PayPaling? Where are you Venmoing? Where are you paying? And get an idea for where your pebbles and your sand are when it comes to expenses. Part of this is looking at all those subscriptions. I don't know about you, but this is something I fall prey to a lot. I do a trial subscription and I'm like, okay, yeah, I like this. And so I sign up for it and it auto renews every year. And all of a sudden I'm looking at my bank statement, I'm looking at my bank account. I'm like, what the heck is this? Oh, that's that renewal of that subscription that I haven't looked at in over 6 months, or I haven't watched that streaming service in the last 6 weeks. Being on the ball and taking care of subscriptions, especially in areas where you don't use it that much anymore. The old-fashioned thing, trying to figure out what can you go without. What can you go without? And this is something that has almost a positive impact in the times of this pandemic, in that a lot of people with not going out as much, not socializing as much, their grocery bills are going up a little bit, but their out to eat budgets have gone way down. You're not going into the office every day, so maybe you're not buying yourself lunch every day. So what you can go without has all of a sudden come to the forefront as a part of this pandemic because you're going without. You don't have to spend for lunch. And it's kind of building a little bit of a cushion for those of you who are in the position where, yeah, I'm still working and I'm still working in a job that I like, but I'm working from home now. So now I'm going without transportation costs, less gas, less repairs on my car, less go out to eat costs. All of those things have helped to manage personal expenses. The final area in managing expenses has to do with refinancing. And I'm not just talking about your house, although interest rates are still really low. And if you are in a position and you haven't looked at your interest rate in a while, this is a very viable way to reduce your housing costs immediately. I will tell you though, it will take a while. Right now, refinancing is hot because interest rates are low. So it takes a while to go through the process, no matter who you go with. But don't forget also about refinancing maybe your car or any of your other debt that you might have out if you've taken out any type of personal loan or even credit card companies. Credit card companies right now are open to helping with, during the pandemic times, refinancing or maybe giving you a lower interest rate. So check out all those avenues that you are able to look at and see if that's a way that you can reduce your out-of-pocket day-to-day expenses. The third leg of the stool, debt. You can reduce debt. Now, the only way you can reduce debt is if you have some additional cash flow. And we've talked about 2 ways to generate additional cash flow: improving your income and reducing your expenses. You take that second job, you're carrying some credit card debt, and I will, full disclosure, when I was in my worst financial shape years ago, I had almost $30,000 of credit card debt, which I have totally paid off. I did it by taking that second job, and everything I earned went to pay off that credit card debt. but that's your main way of focusing on debt reduction. You got to be able to either generate some more income, or you need to reduce your expenses, or a combination of both. Now, for those of you who are out there that are in that position where I've still got my job and my expenses are reduced, or I think I can reduce them, what should I do with that additional money? I would always recommend the first thing to do is to try to save up for an emergency fund. More on that in a minute. But secondly, take a look at your debt. If you're carrying debt, especially credit card debt, try to get that reduced. If you're carrying credit card debt where you're in the 10, 12, 18, 20% range, putting some money towards that debt is a great idea. If you got a stimulus check and you're in that position where you can use it to pay down debt, that's another good source of being able to pay for debt. But obviously, if you are unemployed, you need to triage. And when you get a stimulus check, you need to triage what expenses need to be paid. And when that happens, food is first. Put food on the table for yourself and your family. Then housing, utilities. Housing and utilities would be next. Then transportation costs to get you out, to get you maybe to a job. And debt kind of comes in last when that happens. You want to be proactive with your lenders and tell them, hey, look, I'm unemployed. I need to renegotiate my interest rate. I need to have a deferral of payments. But if you are in that type of situation, you will need to triage your expenses, especially when you get something like a stimulus check. Where are you going to use it first? If you're carrying student loan debt has been deferred since almost the beginning of the pandemic. Federal government in the CARES Act, and it will probably be extended, has deferred all payments on student debt, including interest. No interest right now is accruing on your student debt if you are carrying debt, student debt. So no interest is accruing and you're not required to make a payment. If you are unemployed, this has been a godsend. If you are still employed and you're like, woo, no student debt payments, I would probably recommend that you rethink that. If you are still in the same financial position that you were before, I would recommend continuing making your student debt payments. And here's why. Because the interest is being deferred, there's no interest that is accruing to your student loan debt right now. If you continue to make your payments that you normally would have made on your student loans, every dollar of that will go to reduce the principal of your student loan debt. So you can really make a dent in your student loan debt balances right now, if it's possible. So that's something to consider. Reducing debt, you may want to look into consolidation. And I put a question mark there because there are some good ways to consolidate, and there are other ways that, quite honestly, it's like loan shark money. You know, your payday lenders and your really high interest lenders, I would never recommend that for debt consolidation. But for some of you, you may have the opportunity to perhaps take out a personal loan that is at a lower interest rate than an 18% credit card. You may also say, well, Ann, should I take out of my 401k? I would only do this as a last resort. If you are able to take a loan from your 401k and you're going to be repaying yourself and you are in dire straits, it might be something that it's a good way to triage and get either debt paid down or get some cash freed up for expenses. But I would say try to hold off on that because ultimately you will want to retire. And the closer you are to retirement, the less I would even consider doing that. But the main thing is to focus on reducing debt as much as you can, if it's possible right now. My last stool, my last leg of the stool is assets. Building and managing your assets. How do you build wealth? How do you manage those assets? And managing assets is an interesting challenge sometimes when you're thinking about personal finance, because many people are living day to day. You know, I'm living paycheck to paycheck. I don't really know how to build my wealth or how to manage my assets. And through this webinar, hopefully I've given you some ideas of what you could possibly do to build a cushion, to build some sort of cushion in your personal finances that allows you to start building that rainy day fund. When you're managing your assets, that's one of the first things that you want to do. And, you know, financial experts go back and forth on how much should you have in your rainy day fund. Some experts will say 3 months. I think this last year has shown us maybe 6 months is really a better way to do that. Now, that doesn't mean you stick 6 months of expenses into a bank account or under your pillow or anything like that. You want to think wisely about where you put your money. And right now, there are a lot of really low fees places that you can do some minimal investing in. If you feel comfortable buying stocks, might be a way, or there's a lot of mutual funds that are out there that will give you a better yield than putting something into a savings account. But look at all of your aspects of the rainy day fund. The main thing that you want to keep in mind with a rainy day fund is you want to be able to access it if you have a rainy day. So you don't want to tie it up into something where there's a penalty for withdrawing it. Whether that's like a certificate of deposit or you know, your retirement accounts. The rainy day fund should be something that's fairly liquid, that you can get to it when you need it. If you can build up 6 months in that type of fund, that's great. That tides you over for a long period of time. Also, just getting beyond the rainy day fund. And I'm not talking about retirement planning. I'm going to talk about that in a moment. But moving beyond the rainy day fund to look at saving for your big ticket items. I want to buy a house. I need to plan for my kids' education. Knowing where you can put your money is a critical function of managing your assets. Let's say you're saving for your kids' educational funds, looking at 459 accounts, 459 accounts, which is has a tax benefit of saving for your kids' education or your grandkids' education at some future point in time. Good place to put your money. Doing some research, and if you're comfortable, as I said, using places like Schwab or E-Trade or any of the online services to do your own portfolio management. Now, if you're not comfortable with that, and there are millions of people who aren't, finding a good financial advisor is a good thing to do. If you are unsure about how to manage your assets, finding someone who listens to you and is able to give you good advice based on your situation and your personal financial makeup, what type of risk you're willing to take. Are you a spender like Anne, or are you a saver? Are you able to build a nest egg? Are you disciplined? Do you follow a budget? Your personal financial advisor should be able to tailor what they're going to recommend to you based on who you are. If you go to a personal financial advisor and they're doing a one-size-fit-all or a cookie cutter type of an approach, that's not the advisor for you. Make sure it's somebody you feel comfortable with. It might be somebody that's referred to you by somebody you know very well. And you go and you meet that person, meet that financial advisor for the first time, and it's not a fit. That happens. Don't feel bad. Continue to look until you find somebody who can understand your goals and align your plan with those goals. Now, the second part of managing assets is retirement planning. And for those of you who are maybe in your 20s or your 30s, you might think, oh man, I got plenty of time. I assure you, that's great. And it seems like you've got plenty of time, but make that time work for you? Time is money. And understanding that there's a variety of things that you can do for retirement planning right now. Maximize it as much as you can. Many of us are familiar and already contributing to a 401k plan or a 403b plan if you're in a nonprofit type of an organization. And that's great. Always be aware of what your company matches and make sure you're contributing at least that amount. So if your company matches up to 3%, you want to make sure you are contributing 3%. If your company matches up to 5%, you want to make sure that you're contributing 5%, because then you're getting 10% into your 401k, and you're only having to come up with half of that. So understanding what your company's plan includes is really important when you're doing your retirement planning. In addition to that, there are a lot of other options in addition to just 401ks or 403bs that are available to you. There are traditional IRA plans. Maybe you're an entrepreneur and you don't have a 401k, or you aren't working at a company that offers a 401k. A traditional IRA might be for you, where you can get a tax advantage when you make your contribution to that plan, but you will be taxed someday when you pull it out after retirement age. There are Roth IRA plans. Roth IRA plans means you take money that you've already paid taxes on and you contribute it into this IRA. It accumulates over time. You can invest it just like you would anything else, like your 401k. And when you get to retirement age, you can take distributions from a Roth tax-free. So those are, just being aware of what you have for retirement planning and take a very holistic approach. Another thing I highly recommend doing as you are looking at retirement planning is go out to Social Security, ssa.gov, and create your account, create your personal account, and you can keep track of, at any age of life, where your estimated Social Security benefit is going to be when you retire. Hopefully it will still be here when you retire, but it may not. But that's something that is a good thing to keep in, because it's a piece of your retirement planning. Not the whole thing. Hopefully you can build some retirement funds and wealth above and beyond your Social Security payout, but something to keep in mind. But be aware of all the areas where you can do retirement planning. Brings me to my last point in managing assets and building wealth. Understanding your personal financial balance sheet. When I teach finance and accounting for non-financial professionals, we talk a lot about a company's P&L, their income statement, how do they generate revenue, where are their expenses. You do that same thing in your own personal life when you're thinking about what type of income am I generating and what have my expenses be? What are my expenses? Your personal balance sheet looks at the assets that you have: house, car, 401k plan, money in the bank, investments that you might have made, and it looks at the debt you're carrying, and it values your net worth. What are you worth today? And understanding how you build that wealth has a lot to do with time value of money. And believe it or not, I have 3 kids. They're all grown now, and they used to have to listen to time value of money lectures at the dinner table over and over and over again. And what I would drill into their heads, and they've done pretty good at listening, believe it or not, grown kids, I am starting to see the results of my planting the seeds early. They understand that if they can sock away $10 a week or $50 a month, how much that can grow to 10 years from now, 15 years from now, 20 years from now. So for those of you at the wonderful Madison School of Business, Wisconsin School of Business, when you took that finance class and they're talking about present value and future value and understanding all of that, you may want to dust off those books and understand future value of money. if I were to deposit X amount of dollars every month, every week, every year, what will it grow to in the future? That's the time value of money. Let your money work for you. Whether you're earning 3% on your investment, 5% on your investment, 10% on your investment, being comfortable with those types of calculations can really help you build money for the future. Maybe not for today, but for the future. Ultimately, when we're talking about personal finances, we talked about the 4 legs of the stool, but what it ultimately comes down to is the middle of the stool. And that middle of the stool that builds on these 4 legs is ultimately you. What are you comfortable with? Are you a goal-driven person? If you're a goal-driven person, using that piece of your personality might really help you in managing your personal finances. Whether it be, I'm going to ask for a raise, I'm going to look for a new job, I'm going to manage my expenses because I'm going to plan for a goal of buying a new car or buying a house or starting my own business. If you are an analytical person, if that's an aspect of your personality, use that to your advantage to analyze what are the different ways I can invest my money. What can I do if I'm in a situation where I am unemployed or underemployed? Where can I go? Where can I find a new job? What are my options with regards to refinancing credit card debt? What are my options? What's out there from a unemployment perspective or a grant perspective or getting help if I need help finding to put food on my table or not having my utilities cut off or rent assistance. There are so many programs that are out there. And if analytics is your thing, doing the time and doing the research can really help you in this area. So understanding what your skill is, where you are in the personal financial world, can really be useful. Two last things before I open up the floor for questions from Jeremiah. One thing I forgot to mention when we were talking about going where the jobs are. If you haven't checked it out, there is another website that I have found and coached people on using that has been very helpful in finding jobs that are remote or flexible or part-time. And that site is called flexjobs.com. Flex Jobs, F-L-E-X jobs.com. Great place to look for flexible jobs that could be 100% remote, could be anywhere in the country or in the world, full-time, part-time, temporary, so let's say I'm unemployed, but I think I'm going to be going back to work in 6 months. I can take a 3, 4, 5 month gig. That might be something that you might want to look into in that particular area. And finally, if you are an entrepreneur, if you own a small business, your business finance quite often is also your personal finance. There are a lot of programs that are out there beyond the PPP loans, the Small Business Association loans. There is a lot above and beyond that. City of Milwaukee has separate grants. State of Wisconsin has separate grants. There are nonprofits that offer a lot of help as well as financial assistance. Close as your computer. So if that's something where you do own your own business and you're struggling, that adds kind of a different perspective to personal finance, but there are resources that are out there for you. With that, with our last 15 minutes, I'm going to turn it over to Jeremiah. Jeremiah, do we have any questions in the chat room?
Thank you, Anne. Wonderful presentation. For anybody that would like to ask Anne a question, go to the orange box with the arrow in it. If you've minimized it, you can click that to open up the options, and there is a box called questions. Inside of that box, you can ask a question. We do have a few questions already sent in. So, Anne, we have an individual that's currently facing a financial crisis. What bills would you recommend that they pay first?
This gets back to the triage. You know, to use a healthcare analogy, you take the patient that's nearest death. Well, within a crisis situation, you always want to put food on the table first. You've got to keep yourself fed. You know, judiciously really find ways to cut your food budget, but that's your first place. And if you are in that crisis mode, understand that where you can get resources, whether it's from a local food bank, it might be from a religious organization or a nonprofit organization. Food is first. Then your shelter expenses. So rent, rental assistance, utilities, those types of things. Right now, during the pandemic, there are a lot of plans that are out there that your utilities will not be shut off. So, but you need to contact Alliant or MG&E, whomever is your provider of your utilities, and talk to them. Same with rental assistance. If you're renting an apartment, talking to your landlord, going to your county housing authorities, those are places that you want to go to secure resources where you can either get reduced rent, you can get rental assistance, or you can work with your landlord to not be you're not going to be evicted. Those are things that would come second. Third would be transportation, making sure that you can put some gas in your car, you can keep your car or serviceable, or relying on public transportation, that you have your bus pass, whatever that may be, in order to get you around to get you to your job or to help you look for new jobs. Back to the utilities area, you want to make sure that you still have access to the internet, whether it be through your phone or home computer, whatever it may be, because that's what's really going to help you if you're in that crisis mode and need to get another job. That's also going to help. Debt reduction or debt refinancing is the last area that you would go towards, and that's something that, again, you need to reach out to your lenders and ask them for either lower interest rates, deferral of payments, whatever that might be. A lot of people think that healthcare costs, I went to the doctor, I had to go into the hospital, I've got a $15,000, maybe hospital bill, or I got a $2,000 doctor bill, I got to pay that first. Believe it or not, those are actually can go to the bottom of the pile. Not that you shouldn't pay them, but most healthcare facilities, if you talk to them and you throw $10 a month towards the bill, will not come after you, but you got to talk to them. So that would be my recommendation.
Thanks, Anne. And that actually is a good lead into our next question. When you talked about refinancing, so a lot of organizations now are charging a fee to refinance, whether it's your mortgage, an auto loan, or a credit card. What's the best strategy to go about refinancing? Is it to go with the lowest rate, lowest refinance fee, or is there something else that you would recommend?
And that's usually the teeter-totter of refinance. If you want a really, really lower rate, you pay a little bit more in that fee, in those closing costs. In essence, what you're doing is you're kind of prepaying that interest, and vice versa. If you want to take on a little bit of a higher debt, or I'm sorry, a little bit higher interest rate, your fees are usually lower. And most mortgage companies, I'm just going to use the mortgage for an example here. Most mortgage companies will disclose that right up front. For example, I'm a geek. I listen to personal finance podcasts and things like that. And I was listening to a mortgage lender. I'm not going to say anybody because I don't want to recommend anybody, but the gentleman from this mortgage lender was saying, if you've got great credit, you got the good credit scores, and got a job and all of that, you could get an interest rate of perhaps like around 2.5 to 2.7% if you pay approximately $4,000 in all total closing costs. But if you wanted to go with no closing costs, your interest rate would go up to about 3.2 to 3.5%. So it's finding what is best for you. The general rule is if you're paying a lot of closing costs and you're not planning on living in that home for more than 5 years, that's not the route to go, because you really haven't had a chance to amortize or depreciate those costs over the time you live in the house. So that's something to consider also. But it's like anything else. You want to do some shopping and look around and compare and contrast what that fee is versus what the lower interest rate is. And to get back to my time value of money, if you really wanted to geek out and get financial on it, you could do a time value of money. What's the present value of all my future payments compared to what I have to pay? The difference in the interest rates versus what I have to pay now, and is it worth it? So shout out to anybody who likes to do present value calculations, which I know is all of you on this webinar.
Thanks, Ann. We have another question. So besides Glassdoor, do you have any recommendations for other sources of salary data? Are there any companies that you could recommend that would be good advisors in this area of salary data?
For salary data, Glassdoor is the one that I use a lot, simply because it crosses all industries and all types of positions within your industry or within your position. There are usually associations that provide salary data. I gave the example of, if you're an accountant, Robert Half has that type of information out there. If you're in a nonprofit organization, I believe the initials of it are NPI, Nonprofit Institute, I believe is what it is. They have a salary survey that gives salary ranges for folks that are in nonprofit organizations. If you're in project management, the Project Management Association is a place where you can get salary surveys. If you're in HR, SHRM is a great source of knowledge for different salary surveys that are for HR people. So Glassdoor is one that goes across all different types of positions and industries. If you're looking at something more specific to your industry or your type, I would go to the association websites and just search for a salary survey, and there's a ton of them that are out there.
Thank you, Ann. We have another question. How would you go about finding a good financial advisor? What would be your recommendation? There's so many out there. There's so many different companies, different organizations that provide it, different financial providers providing that service. What would be your recommendation?
This is a really tough question, because just about anybody can kind of hang out a shingle and be a financial advisor. There are licensing and certification boards. So like there's a CFP, Certified Financial Planner, but that doesn't guarantee that the person is going to be good for you. It means they've passed a series of exams, they have an education and experience level that makes them certified in this area, but you have to find one that meets your needs. It's like anything else. You're going to interview somebody, and for probably the most important hire that you're ever going to make is your financial advisor, because this is your money that they're going to be helping you with. So that level of comfort is very important. So I would probably start with somebody who's either certified or has some sort of accreditation. The second thing that I would look for, and this is my personal opinion, is I looked when I found my person. Believe it or not, I'm a CPA, I'm an accountant, but I still use a financial advisor because I'm not good at it. Is I picked somebody who charges me a flat fee, whether my performance is really, really good or it's not really good. just simply because I felt more comfortable with that. I like paying a flat fee that they don't make more when I make more, or it just, for me, it worked better. So that's something else is to consider, is how do they charge you? How they deserve to make money, so how do they make their money? Is it a flat fee? Is it based on a percentage of how much your portfolio has gone up or down? Is it, how much do they get maybe from a mutual fund as far as a fee? Those are all things that differ from financial advisor to financial advisor that you need to take into account as you're doing that very important interview process. Word of mouth is good. I don't want to discount word of mouth, but just be aware that, somebody who was really good for me may not be good for you, Jeremiah, just because there might not, there's a chemistry that's required when you hire this person. But always remember, it's you hiring them. You are hiring them for the most important job of your life because it's your money.
Thank you, Anne. We have another attendee that says that they wish that they would have attended this in their 20s. However, that was about 40 years ago. Now looking towards retirement, with no debt, would you recommend going with a more aggressive strategy for investing their finances, or simply increasing their contribution dollar amount, or a combination of
Could
both?
you repeat the very first part of that? I didn't catch it all.
Sure. So we have an attendee that's now in their 60s looking towards retirement and has zero debt, but looking at increasing their savings to be able to retire in a more timely fashion.
Mhm.
What would be your recommendation as far as contributing more of a contribution to a 401k or a retirement plan, or a combination of that with a more aggressive strategy?
Mhm. First of all, I'm not a personal financial advisor, but I'm giving you, from an accounting perspective and a finance perspective, what I would think. And I'm in that same boat. So I would probably not go the aggressive route, because you don't, if the market tanks, you don't have as much time to recover the loss of principal in your portfolio. So if something happens, second wave of pandemic, market tanks again, um, you've lost a significant part of your portfolio that within the next 5 years, you may not rebound. You may not be able to rebound. So I would, I'm always a little more risk averse, but I still do have part of my portfolio in a fairly aggressive fund. But right now, only 5% of my portfolio. The rest of it, I have more in, kind of what they call blue chips, things that are going to give you a steady return. I've kind of looked and readjusted a little bit. When you invest in a mutual fund, you can find out in that mutual fund how they've allocated their assets. So how much of that mutual fund is invested in, let's say, pharmaceuticals, which is going gangbusters right now, or healthcare, or manufacturing. Those are some of the things kind of get in the weeds of when you're investing and looking at your mutual funds, how the assets are allocated within the fund to determine if that's a good fit for you. But I probably would not put too much in aggressive. I would maximize my dollar amount, and I would keep an eye towards doing it with taxes in mind also. That maybe if you haven't opened a Roth, consider doing a Roth, because you can throw $7,500 into your Roth, and it's in your post-tax money. It's in your, like, a take-home pay. You put that into a Roth, and if you can build that Roth up over the next 5 to 10 years, and you start pulling it out, it's going to be tax-free. So that's something also to consider, is some of the tax nuances. You throw more into your 401, you get the tax benefit right now. It reduces your taxable income now, but you will have to pay tax on it once you start taking distributions from your 401.
Thanks, Anne. And it looks like we have about one more time for about one more question. Would there be any resources that you would recommend for continuing to build on that personal finance knowledge? Any podcasts, books, any recommendations that you would make?
Oh, it's a great question. Um, I'm a big fan of the Dummies books. And so there is a Personal Finance for Dummies book that's out there. Really good read, real easy read. I think that that's a kind of one shop fits all or one stop fits all type of a publication. There are different podcasts that are out there. Um, I like Dave Ramsey. I find him kind of fun to listen to. Oh gosh, the other guy that has a podcast, and it's slipping my mind. He just retired. So, oh, Clark Howard. Clark Howard has always been great. I think gives some really great advice when it comes to personal finance. So those are two podcasts that are entertaining and kind of fun and really can give you some information from a personal finance perspective.
Excellent. Well, I'm sorry if we were not able to get to your question. We had many. So with that, thank you everybody for attending. We really appreciate you tuning in to the Wisconsin School of Business Alumni Series, and there will be more webinars to come. And again, thank you so much for your time today. And with that, we wish everybody a healthy and safe rest of the day.